Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, 2021 Threat Landscape. Before we begin, I'd like to cover just a few items regarding this webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a handful of widgets, mainly the Q&A widget, which you can utilize to submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar session. For viewing purposes, you can also expand your viewing window by clicking on the icon found on the top right corner of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. And lastly, do take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to your presenter, Scott Amon.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking time and wanting to participate with us. My name is Scott Amon. I'm a regional principal representing consulting security services for Insight. I'm based out of Minneapolis. I'm going to be leading just the front end of the conversation here, and then the agenda for today is I'm going to walk through a little bit of what I've been seeing with our clients in the market as it relates to the threat landscape and the initiatives they have on their plate. It'll be a brief conversation, and then I'll be turning that over to Chris Cole from McAfee and Kima Hayuk from EA for a discussion on the topic. And then after that, we're going to turn it over. Chris Cole is going to lead a presentation around McAfee's perspective of the threat landscape, and we'll have a Q&A as well. And I just suggest, these kinds of things are best when everybody's participating. If you got, questions, feel free to throw them out there, and we'll facilitate a good discussion here. So first, I'd like to take a bit of a different approach towards addressing the threat landscape. Typically, we speak about threat landscape, about bad actors and those kinds of things from a kind of outside-in perspective. I'd like to take a little bit of an inside-out perspective about the kinds of challenges that we face internally that make deploying and maintaining strong security control environments effective, and also kind of a top-down approach from the business and IT's perspective. So first, I just wanted to start with a little bit of peer review and industry data we've collected to outline some of what most of our clients have on their plates right now. The majority of the business and IT leaders we speak with believe that IT modernization is critical. Oftentimes is referred to as digital transformation, but I think a lot of times if you ask somebody to define that, it's a bit nuanced and vague at times. And so, obviously, as security practitioners, we like to understand what the business objectives are so we can align our security efforts and investments accordingly. And so digging into what that means is very, very important. The rationale the majority of our clients cite for going through a transformation or modernization effort right now is they feel they've got outdated technology and the supporting process they have are a bit legacy, and they need to modify those to kind of adapt to the connected workforce, cloud or hybrid cloud types environments, and making the transition to do that. Data and privacy concerns are at the top of everybody's list for sure. I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out how much emphasis they want to place on the importance of data security and the privacy laws and how those apply. Particularly when you're talking about global organizations, they've got they got a whole basket of laws and legislation to comply with. It varies greatly from company to company, or country to country, excuse me. One of the big areas, and this has been a problem for a while, is a lack of skilled talent and expertise, not just from an IT engineering standpoint, but from a security standpoint. I think in the security field, there are a lot of, I'd refer to as more GRC type security folks that understand regulatory compliance, those kinds of things, how to develop a program and monitor and maintain it, how to respond to audits, third-party risk management, that kind of stuff, but are challenged a little bit more when it comes to security engineers, and that's because you're an engineer first and a security engineer second, and there's a deficiency in IT talent. It's just going to create a larger ripple effect on the security side. And then on top of that, most of these the IT and business leaders cite a lack of a roadmap to help prioritize this journey. And that roadmap's not just orchestrating which elements of their IT they want to modernize first, but the interdependencies that go along with that, and ultimately figuring out how they're going to go from more of a heavy on-prem model to a cloud hybrid type model. So moving into more of a security focus, one of the major challenges that we've got a large amount of new devices. Well, I also used, I just want to point something. I used 2020 statistics just because I figured it'd be a good point here at the end of the year to see if these these data points really played out, and I think they really did, particularly with the pandemic and the changes of remote workforce. It's certainly had an effect on this. But some of the major challenges from a security perspective that our clients are facing is a large amount of new devices going online every hour globally. And particularly when you think about a move towards more virtualization and virtualized assets spinning up and dropping, that makes it much more challenging for security entities to identify those, understand what they are, and understand what kinds of security control environment they need to apply to those. Globally, the number of users continues to increase exponentially. Global data growth is continuing its march as well. The connected workforce is certainly making it more difficult to secure these moving targets. There are multiple methods of accessing information, and instead of the days of debating around bring your own device, we've got bring your own devices. They've got lots of different ways to connect, and so there are a lot of decisions that need to be made around how users are going to be allowed to connect, what kind of information they're going to be able to access and share. There's a major lack of visibility or signal detection among all this noise as well, and that basically creates a great deal of complexity. And the soak time for most bad actors these days is 3 to 6 months. Is typically what we see, particularly around ransomware attacks. They've been in the environment for a while, and they've taken their time to really understand the approach they want to take before they execute it. And the ransomware in particular has become more sophisticated, much quicker, and much more effective. So just to get into some of the focus areas specific to the conversations I've been having with clients this year, and I meet with probably 15 to 20 unique companies a month. The zero trust, ransomware, visibility, as I mentioned, automation, cloud, those are all key topic areas. They come up over and over again. And again, the zero trust was, I think traditionally, if you look back in time and as the security industry's grown, there's been conversations about, all types of trusted zones, three-tiered security architectures, zero trust, air gaps, you name it. I think we're finally at a time where zero trust is getting a definition that people can kind of wrap their heads around more, primarily because of the remote workforce, where we're supporting people in environments that you can't trust. They're on their home networks or in coffee shops, not exactly sure who's on their network. And you might be using their own devices, for example, so they could make the transition quickly. But the common denominator with most of these conversations is that they've got to go from this legacy on-prem model again into more of a zero trust remote workforce environment that's starting to increase the rapid adoption of SaaS-based services as well. So there's a cloud focus not just on consuming services, but on making that migration with the digital transformation around adopting cloud or a hybrid cloud environment. There's a great deal of uncertainty for the future, so it's difficult for security teams to figure out where they want to make this investment, not just on primarily because of the pandemic right now, and there's still some uncertainty in how they're going to operate in the future. Is it going to be, how it is now, where it's heavily remote? Is it going to be somewhere in the middle, or are they going to go back to the way they were before? But that isn't slowing down the digital transformation efforts on the business side. It's modifying a little bit, but it makes it much more difficult for security to get a clear target. And then ransomware, again, is always part of the conversation. And I think what we really like to emphasize there is, preventing ransomware. There are a couple of key areas to focus on, and that's, good IT hygiene is a big one. Making sure you're focusing on identity and access. Those things are the common denominator in all breaches. Someone's vulnerability and then escalated their access. So those are two key areas that are critical, and that's really where it's important to partner with the business. But I think when we think about the security environment and operations, the endpoint security, email, DMARC, and phishing capabilities are critical these days. Again, making sure patching is up to date. In the identity space, making sure they're cleaning up user accounts and your AD, GPO policies, privileged access management, and multi-factor authentication are critical components of addressing ransomware. And you may still get hit by it, but it'll certainly decrease the impact in all likelihood. And then training awareness is a huge one. And that goes throughout the security program, but in these particular topic areas, it's important to modify I'd say the traditional training awareness that's in place around security being everybody's responsibility and also the compliance areas, that employees are responsible for. It's got to get a little bit broader than that in terms of building it into their day-to-day responsibilities, regardless of what their job is. So I think ultimately when you combine the objectives of the business to transform with the existing IT challenges of outdated models and technology, security's really got its work cut out for it, which I think we all feel like that's been the case for a long time, but with everything that's gone on this past year, going into 2021, I think it's certainly going to be challenging for everyone. And I think it's a good opportunity, too, though, to take advantage of it and really start to, maybe think about, hey, if I could do this all over again, what would I do? How would I do it? And just forget about what you've got in place right now and think about, what you've got what you can do right now if you were going to start over and do it from scratch. Likely not going to be able to do that, but it certainly gives you a way to compare an ideal roadmap with what you've got in place right now and figure out how you're going to make that transition as your business changes. And the key to that, I think, is really just reducing complexity. There's a need to simplify really in order to be flexible enough so that you can adapt the transformational change the business and IT is introducing. I think some of the key ways to do that are really just looking at the security solutions you have and figure out where you can potentially consolidate on security vendors. A lot of the, right now, what's changed, I think, traditionally there have been a lot of one-off solutions, but as time's gone on, these, vendors have matured. They've started creating more platforms that are integrated that really help simplify your ability to detect, prevent, respond to security. And, it reduces the amount of training you need and skill sets you need to manage your operations, and it allows your users to really focus on the things that are more important and more valuable to your organization. And particularly with a limited number of talent out there, it's important to do that. Another is really trying to simplify and automate operations, particularly if you're dealing with a smaller team or a team that's kind of a hybrid where IT owns a bunch of security and you're wearing multiple hats. Areas where you can find to automate operations is going to be key. And as I mentioned before, good hygiene it's critical. Most of the incidents I've been involved with, it was primarily due to a lack of good IT hygiene. There were just everything was unpatched. There were a lot of unsupported systems in the environment, and those are the things that got knocked over first. And then finally, I'd say looking at upskilling your employees, getting their IQ up, getting them into some engineering skills. Really integrating them, trying to integrate them into what the business is doing around transformation so that you can, ideally design a model that has security built in, security's in mind when it's built. That's about all I have right now. If there are any questions, feel free to kick them out. But with that, I'll be turning it over to Chris and Kima.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate that. Great overview. Sorry, getting a little bit of feedback there. No, I really appreciate the overview. Case in point, Insight has always been such a fantastic partner to McAfee, and they really have been at the forefront of really understanding their customers and overall the threat landscape and how the technology should behave and should be implemented in some of these large, complex environments. And so, we definitely have a very strong partnership with one another and for the purposes of cybersecurity. So you heard a lot from Scott here, and I heard simplification in operations. I couldn't agree more. If you scroll through LinkedIn or go to any cybersecurity kind of website, the whole notion of XDR, extended detection and response, is coming to the forefront of a security provider near you, so to speak. And that's really around simplification of security operations. And when something goes bump in the night, no matter where you are, can you respond? Can you shorten down the window of detection and response? And you can't do this with just like one vendor, one provider, one technology. You have to be in concert and orchestrate across multiple different technologies. Many of us are going to have a different firewall manufacturer than we're going to have from an endpoint manufacturer and so forth. And so how do we get these technologies to work responsibly with one another to help them each other understand exactly what are we dealing with? And is this unknown? And is this potentially ransomware? And then how do we respond to that before it causes pain within the business? So we're going to talk a lot about that. And I think it's always great to hear sort of what those pain points are and how a customer is dealing with those situations by just talking to a customer, talking to somebody who's in the trenches with regards to the cybersecurity landscape. And so I'm really excited that this morning we have Kima Hayuk of Electronic Arts with us this morning. And Kima and I are going to go back and forth on a couple little Q&A things around to get his sort of idea of really what are we dealing with and what do we need to do in order to kind of accommodate, the transformation that we're going through, which Scott identified earlier is a main thing that people are doing. So, Kima, how are you? Good morning.
I'm doing well, Chris. Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent. So why don't we just jump right in for everybody on the line here? And what I want to do is just, first off, can you introduce yourself? What's your day-to-day responsibilities? And what's front of mind for you overall from a security perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Kima Hayuk, and I manage the IP protection program at Electronic Arts. Electronic Arts is the world's leading manufacturer of video games, and we provide entertainment to millions of people around the world. So in my day job, I protect the intellectual property, but I'm also deeply involved with protecting our cloud assets and protecting our cloud services, because not only are we a cloud company that delivers our products via the cloud and live services, but we also consume all of the different cloud services that are so common in our industry and in industry in general. And so I'm responsible for securing those things like G Drive and Office and Slack and what have you.
Oh, great, thanks. So let's kind of dig into just a few things here. The first thing that I think about, right, is, come around March, I think the whole world kind of took a complete 360 turn, and everybody started to work from home and things started to get shut down. So how has this year kind of changed your perception of security, also Electronic Arts of perspective of security? I mean, obviously, the thing that comes to my mind is like you guys have an unbelievable amount of intellectual property, and so how has that changed the game for you?
Yeah, I think the big lesson here is always be ready for the unexpected. If we had been talking, 1 year ago today, we would have never anticipated. There would have been certain things on the horizon that we would have talked about. We would have talked about the rise of ransomware. We would have talked about, sort of the cutting edge of quantum computing and AI and how those are going to affect the threat landscape. But we wouldn't have been talking about working from home. We wouldn't have been talking about this radical decentralization of assets and all of the different effects that would have, not only on our infrastructure and what we consider our environment, but also on our workforce. And now we have people who are facing entirely different threats than they would have if they were in the office. They're subject to being preyed upon by malicious actors. And so you have this entirely new vector of risk that has come from the working from home that we would. So expect the unexpected is I think the thing that this year underscores.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? It's like squirrel. All of a sudden you have to think differently and react to the different things that are thrown at you. So we completely understand that, and that's an interesting thing that we all have to deal with. Here's another one that I think is also very relevant. Everybody's doing some level of business transformation. How has this pandemic, this change in work philosophy, work from home, has this thrown you guys into overdrive with regards to using cloud services? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, it really has. We're a cloud company, as I mentioned. Not only do our employees use all the cloud services that are everyone's familiar with, but we ourselves deliver our entertainment experiences to millions of players via the cloud, via that same infrastructure that everyone uses. We're on all of the different IaaS platforms. We're on all the different SaaS platforms we use it all, and we have to protect it all. And so we have these cutting edge threats like connected apps, because now every app is its own platform for things that can connect to it. And so we've really had to change the way we look at cloud apps, because now they're really the norm rather than the exception, and we have to treat business that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think about being upstairs on my console du jour, let's say it's Xbox, PlayStation, and I think to myself, I want to download and play, a new EA game, what have you, whether it's Madden or any of the other awesome titles that you guys have. It's a supply chain issue in some cases where, from the point the code is rendered and built and the game is packaged, and then how do you get it out there? And I think that's it. You have to look at this holistically, down to the consumer itself. So it's an interesting battle. Speaking to the threat landscape, cloud is obviously, a new data center. It's a new environment, right? And how do you guys kind of think about staying ahead of the adversary? Are you guys using any kind of EDR technology, threat feeds? How do you understand sort of that attack surface area?
Yeah, our attack surface area is always growing, as you mentioned, with the move to work from home. Our developers are now doing all of their work, from home. But we have to employ everything. Threat EDR and threat intelligence really feed off of each other. EDR depends on good threat intelligence to be able to have actionable, stuff to work with, right? And then likely threat intelligence also has to get its feed from somewhere. And so at the end of the day, we can't choose between these. We have to settle on something in each category and really judiciously make our bets to be able to cover all of the different risk areas, because at the end of the day, there's always more risk, and there's emerging risk that we have to be aware of, and then there's technical debt and other things to acknowledge, and so in this constantly changing landscape, we can't choose between EDR and threat intelligence. We have to do both in a way that they support each other. Right.
Yeah, and I also think, right, how do we address the vulnerabilities? How do we detect vulnerabilities as they emerge on the different platforms that we have? And it's this day and age, it's not easy, right? Because the way that you build an application potentially in AWS versus Azure versus GCP, all kind of fundamentally different. Yeah, if you're building a base operating system for a workload and what have you, then you have containerization, which is sort of that new paradigm in app development. And I'm sure, those customers like EA are probably, if not already there, going that direction. We see that from the largest enterprises.
Oh, no, we're totally there. And, it's, speaking of misconfigurations, it's interesting because you can look at the shift left and the containerization, but then you can also look at some really interesting stuff that McAfee is doing with SaaS vulnerabilities and SaaS configuration. Where now we can look at Office and we can look at G Drive and make sure that our configuration of our instances is proper. So you see it in all these different aspects of cloud where we're really looking to get ahead of the problem and identify vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, before they happen, ideally.
Right. Yeah, it is a board-level discussion. And, we find that, hey, if we're going to go to cloud, are we securing it as we evolve it, as it matures, as it grows in depth and breadth? What Kim was referring to is like posture management in the cloud, right? Or do we have the right configurations? If we have an Amazon S3 bucket with structured and unstructured data in it, what have you, is it private, is it public? If it's public and it's proprietary, well, they need to be alerted to those types of things. So, that's a great point. And, operations too, right? I've been kind of telling customers and partners too that the security operations center, focus on center there, has really changed. We don't have typical analysts sitting in front of a computer in an office, looking at 4 different screens with threat feeds coming in and SIEM dashboards. So the SOC as we've known it is kind of morphed itself. It's a little bit deprecated and dead from a perspective of how we used to do it. So how are you guys like operationalizing security, given that everybody's kind of spread so thin and geographically dispersed and not necessarily in the office these days?
Yeah, that's a great point, because if we had to talk about how security operations have changed this year, the biggest thing is that we've gone from being in the same room working, huddled around different monitors and working together to really having to collaborate in a distributed mode and having our SOC being at each analyst's home, literally. And our analysts are also working from home, and so our entire operations has moved into this work from home configuration. And all of a sudden we're looking and seeing and taking a look and seeing things that we never considered possible are also all of a sudden possible. We're virtualizing our privileged access workstations. We're taking all kinds of steps to enable better collaboration within our SOC, employing some of the same tools, as well as developing bespoke ones ourselves, so that we can really confront this paradigm shift really at the forefront. Because we have a globally distributed workforce who's our office in China was shut down among the very first offices of the entire pandemic, and then we've had various attempts at reopening, but all through it, our SOC has been able to manage it all on such an outstanding basis. And so, really, it's taking a look at and seeing that you can do things that you never imagined were possible because of the challenges that you were confronted with in the past year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess as a human, as we're presented with interesting circumstances, we figure out ways to sort of innovate around that. And so, yeah, it's definitely been that. I'm hearing that from many different customers as work from home has changed sort of how we do things, right? And me personally, I'm working way more hours working from home than I ever did in the office. It's just because I think we're accessible through many different platforms in many different ways. So last question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Between Teams, Zoom, WebEx, and now we have this new platform. It's pretty crazy. So we're always accessible, and sometimes my wife tells me, "Hey, just put your phone in the safe, and I'm going to erase the code, so you won't be tempted to look at it."
Yeah, that's right.
So, and I think here's a general question, right? Cybersecurity talent. There's not enough of it growing on trees. How do you guys think about that? How do you cultivate talent from within? What is your philosophy on bringing talent from the outside? How do you take care of that cultivation of it?
That is a great question, and it's actually one of the ones I'm the most proud of with my company, because what we're doing is we're aligning two of our important company philosophies, and one is to have career development and career growth, and the other is diversity and inclusion. And my company is very much focused on meeting the demands of players all around the world, and so we want our workforce to represent the people all around the world, the players all around the world. We want our workforce to represent that. And so when we look at security talent in particular, we're leaning on our diversity and inclusion to find talent in places where it hasn't always been. We're not looking for the stereotype, security engineers. We're going to places like Grace Hopper, frankly, to look, for all the amazing talent coming out of there. Grace Hopper is a great annual thing for women and computing and security, and so EA is heavily represented there. And we're also looking to hire in other communities and geographies where people haven't looked for talent before, so that not only are we getting sometimes cutting edge talent in places that are underappreciated, but we're also fulfilling our mission on diversity and inclusion. And so it's a great alignment and something that my company has been working at very hard.
God, I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, we do the same thing over here. We have women in cybersecurity, and my coworker, my partner in crime, she's the president of the WISE Ladies Union, if you will, with inside McAfee, and we're trying to cultivate, from within and from without, and think about college graduates and internships, and being able to coach people that are younger that have the aptitude and the desire to jump into the cybersecurity space.
Yeah,
so
we have huge. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say we have huge internship programs, and we're really trying to get talent as quickly as it develops because there's a huge need for it, and we're competing with the biggest companies in the world for it.
Fantastic. So we went through 5 different kind of scenarios, questions, and we really appreciate the feedback. So before I jump into a little bit more about how McAfee's kind of dealing with this scenario, sort of the strategy overall, any last words from you, Kima? Any last words? If I had $1 billion, what would I do? What coaching would you give the audience?
Oh, cover all your bases. Be prepared for the black swans. Look for the long tail of risk, and make sure you have a plan for everything. Even if you can't, be prepared for anything because anything could happen. And I think that's what this year has taught us. So be well, everyone.
No, awesome. Appreciate it. So, Kima, really appreciate it. Electronic Arts, fantastic company, and really, I've learned some things today too. So hopefully you guys heard that and it resonates with you. Certainly love hearing from our customers, the folks in the trenches actually doing the work. So with the time we have left, and we definitely want to leave time for Q&A, so don't be shy out there, right? If you've got a question for Kima or me, Insight with Scott, and the team, please, just let us know. We're here to answer those questions. This is your time. For me, some of the things that are frontline, just shifting really quick. And I think it's also parallel to what the other 2 gentlemen were talking about. First and foremost, one thing that we see in particular, it's not a one-size-fits-all. I just can't do, buy one cloud architecture. We find that most customers are evolving to many. And the reason being is that, AWS does certain things very well, and it does it differently than how Azure does it and how GCP does it. We find a lot more customers kind of thinking about containerization or K8, Kubernetes within GCP versus other cloud platforms. And so how we evaluate, how we look at, how we evaluate the attack surface area and the vulnerabilities within it varies from place to place. And the struggle is, if I have multiple cloud architectures, how will I more or less get a consolidated view from a security posture across many different architectures, from an infrastructure as a service provider versus, a SaaS provider? That's another element of configuration. And the cloud is introducing a lot of really interesting things as we, go to the coffee shop, socially distanced, of course. How do we say, all right, I'm going to connect to the Google Starbucks network, and then now I'm working from home, but I'm working from an unknown location. What is the cloud? How does the cloud perceive that? Am I trusted? Well, sort of. Because I can prove my identity, but I can't prove potentially who I am. And so what do? 2-factor authentication. And so those are some of the low-hanging things that we need to really think about that are doable, that should be instrumental in securing cloud architectures, because I saw on the Today Show, identities are still the gold as to how the bad guys get access to us. The Today Show this morning was talking about compromised credentials and how they can get on your Ring doorbell and your Nest devices and things of that nature. So that's a little bit more consumer focused, but obviously, it fits the narrative. Zero trust is another thing. It's evolving. It's constantly evolving, right? Zero trust to you versus zero trust to me. Bottom line is we're all trying to save and protect our crown jewels. Take Electronic Arts. Who's on the Madden cover in 2021? Well, they may already know that, but we're not supposed to know that for a period of time, and they certainly don't want to allow that intellectual property, the code, the development aspect of their things to be on the web or the dark web ultimately. So zero trust, who I am, where I'm coming from, prove it. Is my system managed? Is it not? And then contextually decide, hey, what level of access do I get? based on where I am and who I am. And then lastly is that we see across many different customers, right? The way I bucket the world today, and this is just the way I think about it, is data and threats. What data am I trying to protect and what bad actors am I trying to mitigate, right? And why do I have threat protection in place? Well, it's to protect the data. And so these two worlds are very much relevant and intertwined with one another. And so what we see the market doing is really incorporating data protection into what we call SASE and zero trust models. Because now we can say, all right, now we know who you are based on who you are and what level of access and data privilege you have. You can and cannot share that intellectual property outside the company, right? It has to stay in its own swim lane. And so we have to think broadly and widely of where data is, which it is everywhere. How do we tag it? How do we actually put constructive rules on it? And how do we build a cohesive policy across multiple different platforms and protections and endpoints and servers and storage architectures? And it's not easy. So the best way that the market is addressing this is comprehensive network, cloud, and web, DLP, all converged singularly into a single platform. So those are some of the things top of mind for me. Now, we've talked a little bit about the threat landscape. McAfee certainly has been in business for 30 years, and you may not know this, but we have a back-end platform that's running on a giant Hadoop cluster. All right, I would call it a data ocean, if you will. We have 30 years of intelligence backed by that. And this last year, we decided, hey, how do we get this threat intelligence a little bit more outwardly facing to our customers? And this is a view of APT. It's an APT 32, I believe. And one thing in particular that we always struggle with, customers across the globe is, am I safe? Do I have the right mitigations in place? Is my environment configured properly to mitigate against that ransomware that Scott talked about earlier? And if it's not, well, what must change? What systems need an update? What systems need something new deployed to them? What systems need a tweak to their policy or some sort of technology or content update to them to mitigate against this risk? And so from a thought process around threat protection, the knowledge is very powerful here. And we've exposed this to help with overall EDR and also XDR as it's evolving. Now, I remember I said XDR is EDR is a component of XDR. And as we were evolving, XDR will also incorporate itself into orchestration technologies and other countermeasures within the business, say it's a firewall, an IPS, network device, some sort of mitigation device in the architecture. And so we need to be able to incorporate this threat intelligence, socialize it, so that way other controls can leverage it. And so this is literally what we call insight. And as the market has evolved, we're starting to actually see a lot better intelligence around mapping behaviors associated with these APTs. And so that way we can literally, and I think, Kim or Scott said it both, was shift left. And shift left for me is two different things, two different lines of thinking. One is, how do I shift left and get proactive so I don't have to mitigate and issue, my incident response plan because something got too far down in the kill chain, right? How do I shift left and detect the adversary earlier in the model versus having to beat up inside the kitchen? And so the MITRE ATT&CK is one piece and one element from a threat perspective, but MITRE ATT&CK has also evolved itself to being able to tell you based on how people are interoperating with your cloud architectures, what are your risks and how I'm interoperating with the data. So McAfee has addressed that so that way you can see and understand that based on the adversary landscape and the intellectual property I have inside and based on how they're actually interfacing with my cloud architectures, what behaviors do I need to be worried about as it revolves around MITRE? So really great stuff there. And, what we see from a threat predictions, here's 2020, we're about to turn the corner. And, some of the things that, are predictive, and this is, a lot of these things are within our quarterly threat report at McAfee.com. And we can obviously, if you can't find it, send that to you guys. One, social engineered attacks will get more complex, obviously. There's a website out there called MIT Owned. which will tell you exactly what accounts you've had and ultimately, when were they breached. And so that affects social engineering too, right? So those attacks are going to get more complex. The new normal will be under duress, right? We're living that new normal as we work from home. And as, the industry and the enterprises and the government institutions work rapidly to change architecture to serve the business, hopefully they're evaluating and looking at those vulnerabilities as they go along to ensure that we're mitigating risk and vulnerabilities as we go along. Otherwise, it could lend itself to a situation. More automation and orchestration. We see this across the board, and that is really, why XDR has been shifted into high gear as far as development is concerned. Once again, it's not just one product that does this, it's a concert of products working in concert with one another to help solve a complex problem. Feeding in multiple pieces of information into an analytics backend helps us understand the adversary. Something went bump in the night, it's never done that before, and react and respond to it based on playbooks. So that to me is super important. And then, where you are, I think the gentleman also mentioned that we've got remote employees connecting all over the place. How do I get visibility and control to my endpoint no matter where it's connected? And that is cloud, ultimately, right? And McAfee has addressed this by a multitude of different ways. There's a back-end protocol that we leverage called Data Exchange Layer. It helps us keep persistence with our endpoints and our network devices and our cloud architectures. So at a moment's notice, if we need to query the architecture to say, show me all the systems in the world that have this hash value running as a service because we know it's bad, well, I can get that information back in seconds. So that's super important, once again, to shrink down that attack window. And data solutions must evolve, right? It can't be, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, it can't be just an endpoint DLP conversation. The conversation will evolve and should evolve, moreover, to what's in the data center, what's in motion, what's at rest, and also what data is going into my cloud architectures. And that has never been more of an issue for that data protection policy cohesiveness that we so desperately need. So those are sort of the threat predictions. And once again, the think tank at McAfee really focuses on those things so that way we can help our customers and our partners, really solve some complex problems. So what I'm going to do right now is kind of jump over to a high-level viewpoint of what I said earlier about shift left. What if you could beat the burglar up in the front yard, shoot the burglar in the front yard versus beating him up inside the kitchen? I live in Texas, so that's the way I think. So pardon me. The first thing is that, how do we get smart on the adversaries as they come into our architecture? As something goes bump in the night that we've never seen it before. Well, it requires an extensive amount of experience in understanding the attack surface area and also understanding behavior. Furthermore, it also requires us to say, hey, we already know that's bad. Let's not let it detonate and get rid of it. And so from a kill chain perspective, I would rather be at the point of reconnaissance versus the point of detonation and exploitation. And so our shift left focus is from our endpoint or our endpoint protection platform is to really mitigate the risk earlier than also, way after the model. And it's really kind of what I call shifting the boom, or as the industry is calling shift left. So case in point, how do I get insight into the threats affecting me or my industry, right? And that is really the notion of the platform that we've released called Insights. And as you can see, here is a view, a high-level view of my organization that literally says, here's where I'm strong and here's where I'm weak. Here are the campaigns that I've seen within my architecture. And then furthermore, help me identify the affected devices, the ones that need attention right now. As an IT guy, I like that because it helps me prioritize where I need to spend my time to plug the hole in the dam. And then so, as I can dig in, I can start to actually really diagnose sort of the high-level view of my architecture, get my overall security posture score, so that way I understand prioritization. I can understand the campaigns that are affecting me or my industry. I can understand the detections relevant to those campaigns. And ultimately, once again, Where do I need to focus my time? What systems are under arrest that have either seen the file, or potentially if the file was encountered, would they or would they not have the ability to defend themselves? And in this case, they do not have the ability to defend themselves. They have insufficient coverage. So at a high level, this is what McAfee has built. It's the ability to see proactively threats and campaigns as they're affecting your industry or other industries globally, and then distill it down to what's important. What do I need to focus on? And then ultimately, at the end of the day, I can pivot into an EDR search on my architecture, and I can take the IOCs related to that campaign and say, confirm it, prove it that I'm not compromised or that I do not have a situation in my architecture. I think about the days when I was a sales engineer and I'd have a CISO come to me and say, hey, Chris, are we protected against this issue? Are we protected against this new thing I read in the security publication? And I'd say, I don't know. Let me get back to you. Now, the power is in the customer's hands. And remember, this is fed by over 1 billion sensors worldwide from our consumer team through all of our enterprise customers. So the threat intelligence that our customers get is the same threat intelligence that's fed and received by our other customers as well. So if you are in the finance industry, you get the benefit of all the other telemetry information that all the other finance customers see. And that is a great thing to speed up the detection and the relevancy of the attack, because you understand it is focused on a particular industry. So it's a very differentiating thing for us, and wanted to kind of showcase that for you as it relates to ransomware and other things as well. The other key thing that's super important to think about is the whole notion of SASE, security, the Secure Access Services Edge. McAfee is really focused on, one, CASB. Remember, McAfee has built up its CASB platform. We're the #1 in the Gartner Magic Quadrant outright. And we've also married the technologies of Secure Web Gateway and DLP together. Why is that important? Well, once again, it's helping with the zero trust initiatives. That says if Chris is working from home, well, I can redirect all of his traffic through a detection cloud for multiple different reasons. One, to see the data in motion that he's sending to the cloud. Two, to see any threats that are being uploaded or downloaded to his device. Three, to decrypt if necessary. And four, also do browser isolation as necessary. Chris is gone. He clicks on a phishing link and he's redirected. He goes to that website, and the remote browser isolation technology within our platform says, you know what? That's an untrusted, unknown website. It barks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. Then let's isolate it selectively based on the unknown risk to the asset and the business. So the other benefit that really is happening here, I mentioned the prediction around we need this cohesive DLP CASB things. Well, that is why we have built this platform, right? If I create a DLP policy, well, then that helps me actually apply that not only to my endpoint environment with the right tagging and understanding of how data should be handled per user, per scenario, but that information is also shared with my CASB platform, the MVISION cloud architecture. So as an administrator, a DLP person, I have to create a policy once that's understood by many. There's efficiencies in that, for sure. So this is a very powerful architecture, and we're going to see a significant amount of growth as customers really start to address, the different components that are part of the overall architecture strategy. So I think Kima mentioned earlier around, hey, what does that security posture look like? How do we understand, where we're strong and where we're weak? And this is what we call CSPM, the Cloud Security Posture Management, if you will. As I mentioned, architectural vulnerabilities and configuration has become board level. It's become very high level, C-level. Are we getting better? Are we trending over time, or are we going backwards? And obviously in this situation, if you're in your infancy in your cloud journey, you might find yourself bottom left. But, hope is on the way. We provide an eloquent list of steps that must be taken and recommendations that should be taken in order to uplift and move you farther up and to the right as to a more secure cloud platform that's serving the business, which is super important. So we see customers really gravitating towards this because it gives them that clear line of sight to understand exactly where do we need to focus, what's important, what's some of the low-hanging fruit. And 9 times out of 10, if we do an evaluation for customers, which we will work with Insight to do as a pro bono, kind of a pre-sales thing, we can kind of give you that coaching and guidance just based on, attaching ourselves to one of your cloud architectures. So it's super important to understand exactly what those focus areas need to be. And one thing to leave you with, right, we're doing a lot of really great things here. Cloud security is paramount for McAfee. We have completely transformed our business, how we deliver cloud-native security controls to our customers. And so we're very proud of this, and it's really just based on the notion of the convergence of things across the platform and even incorporating threat intelligence into my cloud journey. And so if I'm moving to the cloud at a high velocity, and we're just kind of winging it, well, at least we have the understanding to understand where do we need to focus, and what are the configurations that we need to address. And then furthermore, if I was to see a threat actor interface with my cloud architectures, what was that behavior that was identified, and what must be done about it proactively? So a lot of really great things here, and ultimately, we're super excited about that. So I've got like 7 minutes left, and I wanted to give a few minutes to Alexa Phelps, who is one of our channel account managers at McAfee, to kind of close us out. And obviously, if there are any questions from anybody in the audience, happy to address those with the time we have left. And Alexa, are you available?
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. So real quick for me, if you guys would like to hear more about McAfee, maybe do a deeper dive, please reach out to me. My email address is listed here on the slide to schedule a deeper dive with McAfee, maybe do a demo and meet your account manager. I'm happy to help you there. So just let us know if you guys have any questions. With that, Angela, I will go ahead and hand it over to you to see if there's any questions in the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. We do not have any questions in the Q&A as of right now. So with that concludes today's webinar. A big thank you to the presentation team today, and to the attendees, thank you for your time and opportunity to come together. With that, we'll turn you back to your day. Thank you.
Bye now. Thank you.